Welcome back to the Climb the Pocket YouTube page for another Battle in the Trenches episode, Week 7 edition NFL. We got your start sits at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. As always, I hope everyone is doing very well in their leagues. If you like our content, make sure to like the video. We really appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel if you're a fan and don't want to miss any of our future videos. And as always, drop a comment below any of your start sits questions. We will hook you up with an answer. We'll answer every single one. And don't be afraid to drop trade advice, anything like that. We want to help you win your fantasy league. That's why we are here. We're here for the people. All right? So if you enjoy our stuff today, like I said, subscribe. We really, really appreciate it. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, so let's get it. Go over to our website, climbthepocket.com, for all waiver advice, start sits, drop advice, all that kind of good stuff. So go over there and check us out on Twitter. Our handles are on the page, and our Climb the Pocket Twitter is at Climb the Pocket. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Ryan. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Steve, I mean, you're just a well-oiled machine at this point. The plugs are just tremendous. It's week 7. It's we're beyond halfway through the regular season for fantasy football, and it hurts a little bit that we are this far already. And
it's crazy.
It's something I look forward to every year, and that's fantasy football, and that it's going quickly in front of my eyes stings. But there's no off season for fantasy football, and right now we don't even have to worry about that. We're worried about the most important stretch of the year, the playoff push, and that's kind of really what we're gearing up for. We're thick in the bye weeks. There's slim pickings this week. When I was looking at my list, it was tough to take guys that are in suboptimal situations and find silver linings about them to get them in your lineups this week. But you have to do what you have to do. Injuries have been the number one issue in fantasy football this year, and we are now in a heavy bye week. So hopefully we can get a semblance of a winning lineup out there for you. That's what we're at least aiming to do. Make some moves, make some trades. This is the week to make a push. So I'm excited for the home stretch.
Yeah, I'm definitely very excited to get this going. But like you said, I'm not excited for fantasy football season to end. But we're not there yet. We're midseason. We're the playoff push. A lot of our players on these start sit videos are players that aren't going to be in the top 12 of rankings most likely unless they're, an underdog that's getting pushed up into the top 12. These are guys, your middle of the pack, wide receiver 2, running back 2s that we think are elevated this week based on the matchup and whatnot. We also have timestamps below if you want to zoom to your player. We don't mind. We're just here to help you out, help you win your fantasy football matchups, and ultimately your championship. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. We'll start it off, as always, with the stardom quarterbacks, and I'll lead us off. I'm going with Matt Stafford against Atlanta, down in the Dome in Atlanta. They play in a Dome in Detroit, so no weather issues there or anything like that. But Matt Stafford coming off just an okay game against Jacksonville. Something we kind of expected. Maybe he'd have a better game. You were right. He was not a top 10 quarterback. I did tell you he would be. He wasn't, though. And you told people to sit him, so hopefully you listen to Ryan on that advice. But I'm throwing him against Atlanta. Pick on Atlanta. We saw Kirk Cousins struggle right away with a couple of interceptions right away, but he ended up having a pretty decent fantasy day. But I think Matt Stafford is going to be a little more honed in. I think they found a weapon in DeAndre Swift. I think they're going to utilize that in the ground game. Should open up a little more for Kenny Golladay. I think Marvin Jones, I think his good days are ahead of him. He hasn't had any really good days this season, any good weeks, but I think they're ahead of him, and TJ Hawkinson's coming on the scene. So I like Matt Stafford this week against that abysmal Atlanta defense. And then I'm also starting the Rook, Justin Herbert, just coming off a very, very good performance against New Orleans on that Monday night game before their bye week. And this guy's just slinging it everywhere. Hopefully Keenan is ready to go, but Mike Williams stepping up, making great catches. Of course, the number one contested, catch ball catcher in the league, I think, be able to go up there and get the ball. It's, such a good safety blanket for him, for a guy like Justin Herbert to be able to throw the ball up and a dependable guy to grab those balls. And I think Hunter Henry's great. I think Justin Herbert's going to be pretty good in this matchup against Jacksonville. Who are you starting quarterback?
Yeah. So these two guys are two of my favorites, honestly. They're not big name guys, really. But I got to start the chew against Justin Herbert. I got to start Gardner Minshew. For some odd reason, I feel like this ends up being kind of a shootout. Minshew doesn't turn the ball over, and their offense isn't bad. I mean, they had kind of a rough week last week. On the ground, at least with James Robinson, he didn't exactly have the same gusto that he usually has had this season. So I think if they even out the offense a little bit, Minshew gets back to slinging it, Chenault takes another step forward. I really do think Minshew finishes as a top 12 quarterback this year. I really like how he's played, and it's going to be very interesting in Jacksonville as to what they're going to do at quarterback next season. Another guy that I love as a quarterback, I wouldn't call this a revenge game. I would say it's a, hey, do you guys miss me yet game, and that's Teddy Two Gloves against the New Orleans Saints. I do really like the rapport he's built with DJ Moore in the last couple of weeks. He's really tried to get him involved. Moore had, I think, 11 targets last week. And Robby Anderson's been the 1A or 1B to DJ Moore's 1A or 1B. So I like their pass catching options. Mike Davis has been more than good as a running back. So their offense is good, and Teddy Two Gloves does what he does. If he's in the 250 to 270 yard range, he has, I don't know, 2 or 3 passing touchdowns. You love that start, especially in a bye week where there's a couple guys missing. So definitely starting Teddy Bridgewater.
All right, let's snake it right into the sit-em quarterbacks. Who do you got? Who are you putting on the bench?
Yeah, this one's kind of, on par for me, but not really on par in traditional thinking. Derek Carr, I'm sitting him against Tampa Bay. Normally, you like guys that have a bye week. Derek Carr's coming off a bye week, but Aaron Rodgers got absolutely dismantled by the Tampa Bay defense. It was weird to see how well that team played. They had no penalties. They didn't have any sacks given up. As a team, it seems like they're starting to come into themselves, and their defense is good. Post-game, Rob Gronkowski was talking about how good their defense is, and for Gronk to notice how good their defense is, where it just kind of seems like he's going through some motions, tells me all I need to know about how good they feel about their defense internally. So Derek Carr not playing against the Bucs, and I'm also sitting Drew Brees against Carolina. I don't know what to make of Drew Brees. He's floating passes he shouldn't. He's underthrowing guys. And their only offense is through Alvin Kamara, and defenses know that. So if Michael Thomas comes back, it's not as heavy of a sit. Like in a pinch, you could probably play Drew Brees, but I don't love Drew Brees' optics this week.
Yeah, I just want to comment. I was at that Tampa Bay Green Bay game, and it wasn't fun for a Packers fan. So I'll just leave it at that. Nice stadium, though. Nice stadium. My sit quarterbacks. Big Ben at Tennessee. Big Ben, he's been playing decent the last couple of weeks, but all home games. His first away game was the first game of the season against New York, and he had a good game. But I'm thinking Big Ben, away Big Ben is coming back against Tennessee, and their defense has been pretty solid. So I'm going to sit Big Ben this week. We don't know if Deontay is going to be back. And JuJu has been kind of non-existent. And Chase Claypool, coming off a very big game, kind of had just, came back down to earth last week. And I just don't know what to expect out of this team going into Tennessee. So I'm going to pick Big Ben on my bench, look for other options. I'm doing the same with Jared Goff going against Chicago. Chicago's defense has been pretty solid, one of the better defenses in the league. And I think Jared Goff is going to struggle, not coming off a huge passing day, only thrown for 3 touchdowns once this year. So you really like to look for a quarterback that you know can throw for 3 touchdowns, especially a guy like Jared Goff who's going to sling the ball a lot. I just think there's a lot of kind of a risk. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. This game script is probably going to be weird. It's probably going to hit the under. So I'm going to stay away from that game most likely. Let's go ahead and move on to the start running backs. And breakout star in the making, DeAndre Swift for the Detroit Lions. Now, I will just add, I do not trust Matt Patricia that he is going to take what DeAndre Swift did and lead it out of their committee backfield. I think AP is still going to be there. I think Kerryon Johnson's going to be there. But I think they cannot ignore what DeAndre Swift did with his 14 carries for over 100 yards, multiple touchdowns. He looked very, very good. He's going against Atlanta. Pick on Atlanta, and I like DeAndre Swift to keep it rolling. Maybe not have the huge blow-up game he did last week, but definitely a solid day for you. Probably a running back too. So start him, put him in your lineups as a flex during these bye weeks. I think you're gonna like what you get. And then also starting Ron Jones He's a starter in your lineup every week
Oh yeah.
until further notice. 3 straight games of 100 yards, over 20 touches a game over those 3 games. That is just fantastic volume. That's RB1 volume. Clearly, Bruce Arians wasn't lying when he said Rojo's the guy. We don't know what's going to happen with Leonard Fournette. I think a lot of people are questioning whether they should drop him or not. I won't speak on that, but I will say Ron Jones is the guy. They want to get him the ball a lot. He's being effective. He's effective at the goal line. All of that good stuff. If we can improve just a little more in the passing game, I think he's going to be a lethal weapon. But for right now, he's a must start in your lineups. Let's go ahead and move on to your start running backs.
Yeah. So I don't know why this guy wasn't used to start the season really at all, but Justin Jackson against the Jacksonville Jaguars, too many J's to ignore, honestly. He had 20 touches last week, and I really do think that he's kind of taken over that backfield. I mean, he almost had 100 total yards last week, and he's been effective in the air, on the ground, and I think he's a safe flex play for me. I really do like Justin Jackson. I really don't see anything wrong with him. Like I said, I think it's going to be a little bit of a shootout there. So if he finds the end zone, it's a perfect start. Another start that's interesting to me, where it feels like it's kind of trending down, but I still find myself putting him in my lineup, is Jerrick McKinnon. I know at the end of the game, Hasty got most of the touches after Mostert was gone, but they're playing the Patriots. They can't just run north and south, and that's kind of what Hasty was doing. I think they're going to have to get McKinnon involved early and often in the pass game, and we're still a week or two away from Tevin Coleman. Once Tevin Coleman comes back, I'm sure Jerrick McKinnon will be the third back. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they use him a lot this week. So Jerrick McKinnon and Justin Jackson are definitely flex plays to me.
Yeah, I think with Jerrick McKinnon, maybe Hasty got a lot of the touches because they already had a game plan for that game, and Jerrick McKinnon, they're not just going to take him out of his role. They're going to stick with the game plan, throw in the sub for Mostert. So that's kind of what happened. Let's go move on to the sit running backs for yourself.
Yeah, short week. Devonta Freeman is not a fun play to me. I know he was somebody's big fab acquisition in your league, most likely. Hopefully, it wasn't you. Short week for a guy that's not fully. I'm sure he understands the offense, right? But he didn't have a full offseason. They're going against a tough defense in the Philadelphia Eagles. They've got their front four is great. That's the only thing they're good at defensively, seemingly these days. So the run is going to be a major issue, and I really do think that the Eagles are going to dare Daniel Jones to beat them. I'm sure my Eagles will still somehow lose that game, but that's neither here nor there. And this one stings. I saved it, and I'm sitting Joe Mixon, dude. The usage of Gio Bernard around the goal line really limits Joe Mixon.
It's uncalled for.
Like, I think he got 2 or 3 carries from the 2-yard line last week. That is Gio Bernard, not Joe Mixon. I don't know. I don't know if Gio Bernard is more helpful to the rookie quarterback, and that's why it's been Gio season. It's possible, but I feel like they're underutilizing Joe Mixon. But I've been saying that for 2 or 3 years at this point, So maybe Joe Mixon is what he is. I don't feel comfortable getting him in there. Cleveland's pretty solid. I think it's going to be a game that's a pretty quick game just from I think there's no way that Cleveland just doesn't run the ball down Cincinnati's throat. There's not going to be a whole lot of game script for Joe Mixon, and I don't like Joe Mixon at all.
Yeah, he's just a tough one to read. Hopefully he starts to hit his stretch like he did last year at the end of the year. But we're mid-season right now, so right now we're still figuring things out apparently. I think Gio Bernard is kind of a guy you might want to pick up as a handcuff. Sure. You never know what's going to happen. We've seen him do well when he has the entire role himself. But for right now, Joe Mixon, sketchy. My sit running backs, my first one is Boston Scott versus the New York Giants. He's going to be a hot waiver pickup. And that's because Miles Sanders is most likely going to miss 1, 2, possibly 3 games with that knee injury, which we do not like as Miles Sanders owners. But Boston Scott, he was kind of a pickup in the beginning of the year when Miles Sanders got injured, and he didn't really do much in that role. It was much more of a committee with Corey Clement involved and whatnot. And on a short week, I really don't see this as a game, even against the Giants, where Boston Scott is getting a huge workload or anything like that. It's definitely going to be a worked out game plan, a mix between the running backs. They're going to come up with a specialized game plan to, just effectively win this game. And that doesn't really, tune into Boston Scott being the lead running back and the guy that's going to win the game for them. So if you pick up Boston Scott, I don't blame you, but I don't know if I'd start him this week unless you really, really have to, unless you're weak at the running back position. I'm also sitting kind of a layup, but Cam Akers versus Chicago. Cam Akers was non-existent this week. Crazy, because the week before he looked like the best running back on their team, and then he seemingly had 0 snaps in the first half. Finally found the
Garbage.
field. Just nothing. Absolutely nothing. No idea what's going on in this backfield. And until we know, multiple weeks, and I said this last week, multiple weeks of something happening for a person, I'm keeping him on the bench. And going at Chicago, that's no time to take a risk. So I'm putting Cam Akers on my bench, and I'm leaving him there until I see a good string of games and know that he's actually the starter. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. Philly Eagle, Travis Fulgham versus the New York Giants. This is going to be a tough matchup if he faces James Bradberry, but I think it's going to be a decent game for him. He's just getting heavily targeted, 23 targets over the last 2 games. Clearly, what you've heard in the media is him being the X-receiver through Philadelphia. It looks to be true. Even if a guy like Alshon Jeffrey comes back, I think they want this guy to be their, one of their lead dogs. And the target volume alone is making him a must-start for me this week. A lot of people have a lot of guys on bye weeks, and this is a perfect flex fill-in. I'm in a couple leagues where I have 3 wide receivers, and I'm perfectly happy putting him in as my wide receiver 3, knowing I'm going to get 6 to 8 targets at least, and it should be some decent production. He's getting end zone targets, all of that, so I like Travis Fulgham this week. And I'm also going with T. Higgins, a guy that Joe Burrow is just gaining in chemistry with. 125 yards this past game, getting a lot of targets as well. A.J. Green was back on the board, but I liked all these receivers involved. Just the fact that they're all involved. Joe Burrow's still slinging the ball. It's what they want to do. They want the offense to run through Joe Burrow's arm. They know what they have in him, and T. Higgins is growing a rapport with him. So I'm putting T. Higgins in my lineup. Like I said, a lot of bye weeks. You're going to have to fill some guys in. I like T. Higgins as a spot start, as a flex starter as well. Who are you starting? Wide receiver.
Yeah, so I talked up DJ Moore, right? And I talked up his rapport with Teddy Two Gloves. Obviously, NFL coaches know just as much as me with rapport. So that's why I'm starting Robby Anderson. He's going to slap the Saints in the face with a 40-plus yard touchdown. I can already feel it. He's going to hit somebody with a double move, and Malcolm Jenkins is 65 years old, and he's not going to be able to keep up with Robby Anderson.
Ooh,
that's a
blood.
lock. That's a lock. And I'm telling you, Robby Anderson is going to finish. He's going to be a top 15 finish for sure. I really do like Robby Anderson as a play, just because I think that the Panthers will have, I guess, the opportunity to take shots because the Saints are just playing so vanilla as an offense that there's going to be opportunities for the Panthers to take chances because they know what the Saints are doing. I mean, it's a 7-yard dink and dunk offense. So hopefully Robby Anderson gets involved heavy and early, and he hits on one of those home runs. The other guy I'm starting Julian Edelman against San Fran. Face value, it's kind of tough, but I think that the Patriots need to make sure Cam doesn't go off the rails with his play. So I think getting quick outs or just quick hitters to Julian Edelman this week is going to be big. I think Edelman's going to have his 16 fantasy points for 8 catches for 80 yards, and if he finds the end zone, beautiful. I really do think Edelman's a completely safe play, and I'm definitely finding him in my lineups.
Perfect. Wide receivers on the bench. Give them to me.
All right, I'm going to paint you a picture here, Steve. It's October 2019, so a full year ago, right? Darrius Slayton makes his first touchdown. The Giants tweet out, first touchdown by Big Play Slay, right? That's not who I think Big Play Slay is, and I don't think anyone in the world thinks that Darrius Slayton is big play Slay. Well, exactly a year later, big play Slay lines up against Darrius Slayton. I'm not starting him. This is a game where, Darrius Slay should probably lock down Darrius Slayton. I'm just saying that the storylines are too good for that to not be a thing. So if those guys match up one-on-one, I'm taking Darrius Slay every single day of the week. So Slayton on the bench.
He's got that sketchy toe injury too, so that'll slow him down.
That's what I mean. It's clamp season, and I'm sitting Michael Gallup. Dude, like I hate what they're doing to this man. Andy Dalton's garbage. He's just a terrible quarterback, right? And I'm going to have to slightly backtrack that in the next part of this. But Michael Gallup is not getting the target share he deserves. He's a very talented wide receiver. And while Andy Dalton's there, while Andy Dalton's not there, the luxury pick of CeeDee Lamb, unfortunately, was a pick of somebody who's slightly more talented than Michael Gallup. Not saying that Michael Gallup is in any way, shape, or form lacking talent. If he wants to be a Philadelphia Eagle, he would be wide receiver one. I think that's a great move for him.
Send him to the Packers.
That's what I mean. I think every other team in the NFL would love Michael Gallup. I don't understand what they're doing, but it's the way the cookie crumbles, and Michael Gallup just won't see enough target share. So, sorry, Mike.
All right, my sit wide receivers. My first one, tough to hear, but it's JuJu Smith-Schuster for the Steelers at Tennessee. And JuJu's probably on the top 5 skill positions right now in fantasy.
Yep.
Disappointments right now. It's tough. We don't really understand why either, especially because Deontay has been out. Claypool has been great, but where are the rest of the targets going? It just doesn't make sense why JuJu and Big Ben don't have this rapport that they had earlier on in JuJu's career. It's really tough to figure out, but until we figure it out and see more production on a consistent basis, you're going to have to put him on your bench and find a guy like T. Higgins or Travis Fulgham to put in your lineup over him, and it's going to look ugly. It's going to look ugly, and maybe you have to start JuJu, but you certainly cannot have high expectations for him at this point. It's tough to see. I'm also sitting Deebo Samuel. I kind of screwed up on this one last week where I told you to sit Deebo Samuel. It might have been the week before, but I think it was last week. But I'm sitting him this week against New England. I don't like the matchups that Deebo Samuel is going to face. Even last week when he got in the end zone, he didn't have a crazy good game. Wasn't highly effective on the ground as a rusher. I think he just had one rush, but like 65 yards through the air. And I just don't like this matchup for Jimmy G. I can see him falling on his face. I don't like it. Obviously, Deebo Samuel is a part of that. So I'm going to sit Deebo Samuel against New England. I think their defense is still very solid, especially in that secondary. Moving on to the stardom or tight ends. The fantasy wasteland position, pretty much just draw a name out of a hat, throw him in the starts or sits. I'm going to start Robert Tonyan against Houston. Even last week against Tampa Bay, still saw 4 targets, so he's still involved. And that game was just completely out of hand for Green Bay the entire time. The offense was just awful. Did multiple, just handfuls of drives in a row where they got nothing going. So I think it was just a bad game for everyone. Don't really want to look at his stats and take it to heart. I'm going to go off his last good game where he had multiple touchdowns, and I'm going to throw Robert Tonyan in the lineup against Houston, where I think that they can be beat. I think he's going to see 5 to 6 targets in this game, and I think possibly a touchdown. So if you score a touchdown as a tight end, you're pretty much a top 10 tight end in fantasy. So if I'm calling that, you got to get him in your starting lineup. Another guy, going to Jimmy Graham at LA against the Rams. Another kind of ugly pick, but I think he's a guy that's getting a lot of targets. 8 targets last week for Nick Foles. Certainly the volume is there. So, like I said, a guy that could possibly find the end zone. It should be a passing game. The Bears haven't been able to do it. Get it done in the run game that much, especially last week against Carolina. It was kind of weird how they couldn't get it done as much as people thought they would. But I think Jimmy Graham, like I said, is going to be involved. Al Robinson should have a decent game. But I like Jimmy Graham as a stardom tight end this week. Like I said, as ugly as those names sound, they're stardom tight ends for me. I think Robert Tonyan's probably a top 7 tight end this week.
Yeah.
It just sounds weird. Who are you starting?
Yeah. These are also 2 relatively brutal names. And one, I'm starting Eric Ebron.
Okay.
I mean, the tight ends, I can't echo enough, have been absolutely garbage. Like every sleeper tight end has been just pitiful. Like, what is Austin Hooper up to these days? Nothing. And David Njoku still can't beat him out. I don't know what's going on in Cleveland.
Wait, some of the top tight ends last week: Trey Burton, Darren Fells,
dude.
Gronkowski. I mean, these are guys we were not considering starting our lineup, and
Yeah.
now you are. They're like guys that fall in the top 10 to 20, and you're like, oh, he's not a start. And then they're the top 5 tight end. It's really hard to pick them. Go ahead.
So I ran into Trey Burton. I played against Trey Burton.
Mm-hmm.
In what world does anyone like who starts Trey Burton?
I considered it. I couldn't because it was too. I just went with Hayden Hurst, and I was like, the name, whatever.
Yeah, like I played against Trey Burton, and I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. Tyler Higbee's definitely gonna outscore Trey Burton.
Oh.
No, I was wrong.
Swap those. Now Tyler Higbee's bottom 15 and Burton's top 10.
It's disgusting. Yeah. But Eric Ebron, I this is kind of just going off the fact that Juju's been terrible. Deontay's kind of back, and they've kind of gone away from sneaking Vance McDonald in as much as they used to. Ebron's definitely getting integrated more in the offense, which is good to see. I mean, he was always bashed for being picked before Odell Beckham Jr. It's good to see that he's kind of finding some pay dirt with Pittsburgh. And I'm also starting Dalton Schultz. This is mostly because I think the game plan for the Cowboys last night was terrible. It was a terrible game plan. They expected Andy Dalton to be Dak. He's not Dak. They did not have enough game plan to get easy passes involved. The easy passes ended up being a bunch of dump-offs to Zeke, where that's not really what those plays are designed to be. I think Dalton Schultz gets involved early. I think he sees 5 or 6 targets, and in the landscape of tight ends we have now, that's great. He's like probably tight end 2 at that point. If he's like, I really do think Dalton Schultz will be a fine play this week.
All right, who you sitting? Let's cap it off.
Yeah, Jared Cook, he just looks old. He had that long touchdown, but, I mean, he rumbled into the end zone. And I'm sorry, but Rob Gronkowski, you look old too, man. Like, you looked half decent this week. I think he had more yards than he has all year last week, but that was his big game to score a touchdown, and he did, but I don't see him scoring in back-to-back weeks.
It seems like all tight ends, if you're not Mark Andrews, Kittle, or Kelsey, you look really old when you're on the field.
Yeah, I don't understand like what. Like, Zach Ertz, what are we doing, man? You just look like Jason Witten out here. Just like, dude, it is so frustrating. I just miss Dallas Goedert. If you were wondering who our tight end 2 in Philadelphia is this week, it's Richard Rodgers.
Oh, X-Pack. Love it. All right, I'm moving on to sit tight ends. My first one, Evan Engram against Philadelphia. Philadelphia has been able to lock down the tight ends, so I think that's one position you really don't attack them at. And Evan Engram, last game, was able to get a rushing touchdown or something like. He was involved, but it's kind of weird and whatnot. Evan Engram is just not who we thought he was. Another guy who was probably drafted top 7 at the position, who's outside the top 10 right now, and it's just not great. It's not great. And I'm also sitting, maybe this is a surprise to some people based on his last couple of weeks, but Darren Fells, I think he's been getting the volume because Jordan Akins has not been there, and he is expected to be back this week, so I think his target volume will go down. It is, good to see he is being targeted, around the red zone and whatnot. So I think Darren Fells still has a decent upside. If you have to play him, I wouldn't blame you, but I just don't want you to expect the kind of volume that you've received from him in your lineups the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to sit Darren Fells. So there you have it. Your start sits at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight ends for week 7 in the NFL. If you enjoyed today's video, like the video. We really appreciate it. And like I said, drop a comment below of any start sit question. We'll get to every single one. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We'd really appreciate it if you were a part of that. We're going to have a big party when we get there and maybe do a giveaway, wink, wink, if you're a subscriber, so you're not going to want to miss that. check out our website and our Twitter. Ryan's beautiful Twitter handle at Bootleg Fantasy is something you're not going to want to miss. Go follow him on Twitter. And until next time, we will catch you later. Everyone have a good Week 7 fantasy football matchup, and let's bring home a W.